The Young Curators project is now in its third year, and it's given young people an amazing opportunity to learn about curating by exploring how to program different sorts of art forms, so visual art, music, poetry, all sorts of different things. This year has been particularly complex because we've done the whole process online over a series of Zoom calls. This year, the Young Curators have devised an open call based around the theme of folklore, and they were very interested in trying to bring together stories from the past and from different cultures and put them into a contemporary context. One of the things they also were very interested in was trying to find ways of getting as many different voices and as different sorts of artwork into their programming as possible. They've done an amazing job in exploring the complexity of curation whilst doing it all on a Zoom call. So I think the way that they've kind of chosen the work that they've chosen and the presentation of it are a real testimony to their kind of hard work. The Young Curators have been very diligent but also very creative about what they've done this year, and the following is a presentation of their work.
What attracted me to our first artist, Maria's work, was how independent her work was and how creative it was, but not in a very out of the box kind of style. It was very restricted, but there was so much going on in it that was easier to understand while looking at it, and how she included all of our what we'd asked for within her work without forcefully putting it down and making it a statement. It was very secretive, but it was also very flowing. It was there, but you wouldn't straight away look at it and be this is folklore. You have to really look into the work and understand where it's coming from, the backstory to it, and it's really interesting that way.
Folklore to me is about tradition. It's about our Irish heritage. It's something that has been passed down from generation to generation, so I'm interested in it mainly because it makes me feel that I belong to something. It makes me feel like I'm connected to something bigger than just me. It doesn't mean that I think mythology and folklore are relics of the past, but more they're relevant today, I think, in our history today. We tend to borrow elements from all cultures, and it's something that bonds us, it's something that connects us all, especially today in this time of cultural fragmentation. I think it's so nice, and it's a great comfort to know that we are connected in other ways with other nations, and through storytelling and through mythology and folklore. So I think that's why it resonates with me. That's why I'm interested in it and I'm inspired by it.
Inclusivity was important to me because I feel like it's very good to have a wide variety of ages and mediums, and it also gives us a good variety of responses in the work. So The theme idea came about through conversations and brainstorms. Someone mentioned it in one of our Zoom calls and we all just loved the idea, so we rolled with it and brainstormed some more. Maria's work appealed to me because it reminded me of my childhood and the fantasies I imagined and the mythology I had grown up with. I also loved the textures of the paintings and the way she works. So.
I think the Codega, Light in the Way, is definitely one of my favourites, and I suppose it's more poignant now than ever with the pandemic and the COVID. I think it's lovely to imagine, you know, the light bearer, someone leading the way from the darkness into the light and spreading that cheer and that joy and that comfort to others and that support. And I think it's, you know, obvious in the last year the people that have stood out as those light bearers, and especially people in the HSE and the hospital care workers and the carers in the care homes looking after the residents. Over the last year it's been, they've had a tough job, but they've come out the other end. So I think all those people who've worked in those areas need to be applauded. They are definitely the light bearers and the torch bearers. And that's why the Codega for me at the moment is one of my favourite paintings.
A big thing with kids nowadays is that kids don't feel like they are on the same level as adults, or they don't understand grown-ups or whatever. So it's nice to have an environment where you can win something and you're going against people who are older than you and more experienced even. And yeah, it's just like, gives them the opportunity to have that opportunity, you know what I mean? That's what I would say.
I love working with young people. For the last 7 years I have been a tutor for students doing their Leaving Cert for Honours Art and Honours English. So this is my first year having no students, so maybe I missed them and maybe that was why I was drawn to it. But I think the subject matter, obviously I'm very, very interested in folklore, so that's one thing that really appealed to me. I'm also interested to know the young curators, their opinion on, they didn't grow up with folklore, I'm sure. Like, we grew up with no TVs, we sat and relied on people coming in, and our Shanachis and Skeelies coming in and telling us the stories of local history and characters, local characters. And so they, you know, they're being brought up in a digital age. They don't have that social aspect. We had gatherings in our homes where people just, you know, met up and told stories and sang, and I don't know if they have the same experience that we had, so I'd like to know what their take on these stories are and how they can adapt these old stories to modern day, because I think they are old templates. Like, folklore is old templates, but they're old templates that are reimagined and reinvented, and I'm just interested to know how they are going to reinvent these stories for today's society.
And with the paintings, there was some, obviously the paintings didn't have words or a face necessarily. Paintings kind of showed a sense of ominous, kind of like, I don't know, it was just very whimsical almost. It wasn't really an outsider to it, but it was definitely, makes people feel things, you know? So what surprised me about curating the most was the amount of waiting around and not actually coming, basically a lot of vaguity. When we made a decision, it was mostly a vague roundabout of what the decision was going to be, you know? Like, we decided on the platform or the way we're going to do it, but only really vaguely, like, oh, we're going to do it online. In what format? Who knows? We'll figure that out later. So it was kind of like, that surprised me how everyone was a bit like, oh, let's do this, let's do that. And then it actually came together and it worked for somehow.
For Lauren's work, I was really interested in her poem because of how she used modern day and olden day, like the different scale of how life was, and it really just struck me how she took that balance and like kept it throughout the poem solidly. Like, it was really very good.
Lauren's work, I love poetry anyways, and I loved the burlesque and the modern twist and the Greek mythology, and it stuck with me through the whole process of judging, so it just always stood out.
There wasn't really much outsider kind of art given to us with the artists. They more wanted to just present things that already sort of existed, but then the burlesque one was like, that was the one, you know, where it was about the outsider, you know. And I like the theme about the outsider because, like, I was an outsider myself when I was growing up. I didn't have many friends, so, but she made this poem about freedom for just your body, basically. And for, it's kind of like how some people, like women especially, but not even just women, people don't feel comfortable in their own bodies, and sometimes they feel like an outsider of their own body. So, I don't know, the burlesque one was very special. For me anyway, I was immediately, when I read it, I was like...
Burlesque. 6 human shapes reflected, a slow, uncertain strip of tops, not sky-clad yet, wrapped up in cold arms, ashamed, bent elbows to obscure impure nipples, brown and pink. Eyes hip-hop in wet sockets, jerk, pop and lock, relief to rest our gaze on divine melody. A serpent twined from foot to waist. This goddess is unafraid, even with her clothes off. She illustrates that girls with generous proportions simply swim their shoulders to control speed and swirl, while those of more flat physique bounce on the balls of feet. She tells of a time when Gypsy Rose Lee performed on stage with Minskys. A strap snapped and her gown fell with a splash. Every beast in the audience grew horns, and to groans of joy her act was born. She teaches that shame is a fire with flames of doubt that consume. We must be fierce without armor, fearless to reject a Puritan world and emerge like that Phoenician bird, shame the only thing in ashes. She bestows upon us pasties, hand-stitched in custom sizes, tiny shields to mount rebellion against the censorship of our breasts. Tie with a thread for Boston style, still overdressed, laughs Lady Godiva. By the time we glitter on the stage, all our guilt is stripped away. We no longer fear the gaze of men, like Diana feared from Actaeon. Proud of fat folds and soft curves, jubilant tassels swish and twirl.
I suppose the most challenging aspect was working on Zoom, and I suppose working during a time where we weren't sure that by July we'd be able to do it in person, or like what the COVID restrictions were. So we kind of had to, as we went along, we really had to think about, okay, it's possibly going to be online, or it's possibly going to be in real life. And we had to think of both possibilities really far through the process. And I suppose that made it quite difficult because the group decided on an open call. So when you're creating an open call, obviously you create a brief, and the brief is, has outlines, and it says on the brief what the artists will get out of it. So we had to create the brief in such a way, or the open call, so that we were able to fulfill what we told the artists they would receive, but also think of it as that these events could happen either in real life or online. So that just made the open call even more difficult, because open calls are, difficult to do anyway, and this was my first time being on this side of an open call, so it was very interesting, and I actually learned so much about open calls and the amount of work that goes into it, and just how clear they have to be, and I suppose that was the most difficult part, is how clear the open call had to be without us knowing the outcome, not knowing whether it could be in real life or online, if we'd actually get to meet the artists, or if it had to be on Zoom, and how it could be worthwhile for the artists, and how to make everyone happy, how to make the young curators feel fulfilled, and how to make the artists feel fulfilled as well. And I suppose that was something that Andy and I were very aware of through the whole process of the open call and of the project.
Zoom was easy enough. I'm quite used to it already, and it was really nice to have conversations online, as I hadn't met you guys before. So it was just easy, and really you guys are so welcoming, so it was good.
Zoom made this very hard because obviously over Zoom it's not the same as face-to-face, like in person, because you can just chill out, sip tea and whatever, collect your thoughts when you're in person, because you can see that the person is collecting their thoughts. And like, sure, you can do that on Zoom, but it's literally a focus on your face, you're under pressure, and you feel like you're wasting people's time almost when you're like blabbing on or not saying anything. But when you're in person, it's just a relaxed environment, and everyone's drinking their tea or whatever, and everyone could just chill. That's my answer to that.
Okay, well, it's great to be able to welcome Lauren O'Donovan to a Q&A about this amazing project and about her work. Lauren, could you talk a little bit about the process behind your poem Burlesque that the course Young Curators have chosen?
Absolutely, and thank you so much for having me. I think that this poem more or less went the way most of my poems go, and that's, I get attracted to like an idea or a topic, and I just try to absorb a lot of input on that topic and then step away from it for a while. I've never been able to write a good poem when I try to do it, sit down and do it straight on. So I tend to come away from it for a while, normally under a week, or else it's not going to happen. And then as I'm off walking the dog or something like that, some way into the topic or into the poem will occur to me. And then it's kind of a race to get to pen and paper or computer as fast as I can to note down that first draft, get all the words in the first draft out of it. And then I put that away for a while and come back to it and edit it and workshop it if I have the opportunity to do that. I'm lucky to be a part of some great workshops, and just keep on editing it then until it finally shines. Brilliant.
And could you talk a little bit about the inspiration for the poem? I know it uses a very old mythological structure and then repurposes it and brings it up to date. If you'd like to talk about that would be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm lucky enough to be at University College Cork studying at the moment, and I'm doing a module on mythology. So it's kind of like the old stuff that you'd be familiar with, but I never had such an opportunity to do a deep dive into kind of Ovid's Metamorphosis or Virgil's Aeneid. So really tackling those kind of older myths head on. And at the same time, of course, I'm online and I'm part of the contemporary discussion about, gender and equality and marriage equality and, transgender equality, all of this stuff. So both of these things were swirling in my head at the same time. And so as I was going through the myths, I was very much focused on kind of the gender question and looking at all aspects of gender with the myths. So in this poem, Burlesque, it was the myth of Diana and Actaeon, where for once the male in mythology is innocent. Normally it's the other way around, but he stumbles upon Diana nude bathing, and Diana isn't happy about it, and she turns him into a stag who's ultimately ate by his hounds. So I thought it was an extremely interesting myth, because in the poetic world, there's been an awful lot of work done on this myth, and a lot of poems and a lot of paintings. And some people think Diana was justified, some people think that she wasn't. So I got really interested in that, and like that, I took that step back and let my mind kind of work on it. And it was just a random association with burlesque, with comparing Diana as a goddess to a burlesque performer and teacher as a goddess, and kind of linking the two of those together to try and make some kind of commentary about gender, or really to try and make the reader ask some more questions about gender and the way that this myth has been interpreted in the past.
Fabulous. And is burlesque part of an ongoing sort of sequence of work? And maybe you could kind of talk about if there are other projects that you're working on at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Once I got into mythology, it's sort of like it's a bit of a passion now of reimagining, mythology, and I keep on coming back to this gender question over and over again from kind of different angles and exploring, different attributes of that. I have a young daughter as well, Rosie. She's 4, so I find that I'm able to come at it from a lot of different angles. So I am doing a series in mythology, and to be honest, I can't see me stopping doing that. I imagine I'll be a very old lady still reimagining the myths, because it is actually great fun. If you haven't done it yourself and you're an artist in any shape or form, I'd highly recommend it.
That's brilliant. And well, I think that that really gives the audience a great kind of introduction to to the poems, and it's a wonderful response to the young curators kind of call out brief, which was to take something from the past and from another culture, and then to bring it right into the present. So that's wonderful. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you so much. And she flew, with plastic teardrops on soft fingertips. We hot glue coloured craft feathers to a cutout frame. I stick and she snips, semi-plumes to lay, each slightly longer, until it is time for those washed and dried. Grey seagull contour and flight feathers, we gathered together at low tide, along with mottled plumes from the plover. Nearly there, we bend them in a gentle curve to look like the wings of a real bird, and use glittered duct tape, guided by pencil, to attach braided straps to mapboard. She lifts one arm up and then the other. Unaware, I fasten wings on my child's shoulders.
What I really enjoyed about doing this project this year was how from the get-go the gang really wanted this project to be accessible to everyone. So from the get-go they were very clear that they wanted it to be, an artist who works in any field of any age, so that there was no fear for people, who saw the open call and was like, maybe this is just for serious artists or artists of a certain age or a certain standard who maybe already largely known, so that people who are the same age as them could feel comfortable submitting work, and people who are the same age of them did submit work, and Amelia was chosen and was one of the chosen artists. So it's really amazing to, I suppose, to see that in such that awareness from such a young age of making things accessible to everyone, and I thought that was just really gorgeous. and also that they were very aware of different types of artwork, that it didn't have to be, you know, the traditional like painters or like you know, or that they wanted artists who were also like makeup artists, or if they were like chefs or like, you know, working with food or like anything, that it was that awareness as well of art in such a wide frame that I feel like I didn't have that much awareness of art when I was that age. So I think that's just something that I was really surprised by, but also I thought was really, really lovely within the group.
Amelia's work was so different and very modern, and it was very skilled. I loved her work, and the makeup is amazing.
Amelia's work, she was really creative, and it was something we hadn't seen. We didn't get much like submissions of makeup artists, and it was like very striking, and I don't think many people would think about an art show or a project and think about makeup artists, and it was just something new and fresh and more modern day. But the fact that she kind of took in and curated this piece of like olden kind of tales and brought it into like what people are into now, it was really interesting.
We chose the Siren because it was amazing, but after seeing the Siren one, she was also very young as well, and it was just amazing how young she was and was able to create such an amazing art piece.
So yeah, during some of our Zoom calls, we did talk about you know, some things that we took up during the pandemic and some things we've been working on. I know Oren said he took up guitar, I think. So I do think from the get-go, or like from the beginning of this year's project, that yeah, they were all very aware that during the pandemic, we had so much more time and space to explore different skills and explore different interests that we maybe would have thought of doing before, because we would have been so busy, you know. And I think that's probably, yeah, why they chose for it to be so accessible, because they had an awareness that people might be just starting new skills or starting new interests, and or like picking up things that they maybe had left when they were teenagers or younger because they didn't have the time to work on. So I think it's really great that they did want it to be so inclusive, because it actually gave space for all those newcomers to art and the creativity to be included.
The most difficult thing was, I guess, sticking to it. Like, I was interested the whole time. Like, I was in it. I wanted this done, and I was like interested in everything, but like sticking with it when everyone was being all wishy-washy and all this kind of stuff, I was like, oh god, no one is making any proper decisions here. And like, I wasn't making decisions either. I was like literally half dead most of the time because I was so tired from like schoolwork at the same time. But it all worked out in the end. But yeah, that was the most difficult for me anyway. Just sticking with it and being like conscious.
So although the planning of the open call was all online, and the whole process of figuring out a theme and all that was online and over Zoom, it's actually fantastic that now at this stage, at the end stage, that some of the gang, like that we get to meet the gang, you know, in real life, and that they get to meet some of the artists in real life. So it feels like, you know, this nice sort of, it feels even more special than I think it would have if everything was in real life from the get-go. It's like, it feels like we've achieved something, because it's like, oh, now we get to meet each other, now we get to, you know, interview the artists and get to meet some of them and see how they work. So it feels like this really nice, beautiful ending to quite a difficult year. You know, it was difficult at times to stay, you know, focused and productive, and you know, everyone had their own things on, and you know, it's super difficult to work through a pandemic, but it's been amazing, and it's amazing that the gang was able to work through that and get to the end, because now it's just so, you know, fulfilling, and to see how the open call ended up is just really amazing, you know.
The thing that surprised me most about curating was the amount of work that goes in behind curating and behind the scenes.
What surprised me most about the experience was from how short of time we had. Like, we didn't have a very short time, but a lot got done a lot quicker than expected, and everything was created and put together in a very smooth way. Like, there wasn't any big blocks or anything, and it was fairly well like put together, and it kind of flowed through. But definitely from the experience, I think the best thing was just like getting to know everyone and getting to know new tales and getting to like understand new different folklores and like understand other people's medium of art and like the ages and how it affects it all as well.
What I enjoyed the most about the experience was learning about being a curator, really. Just because I never really knew how people ever organised anything, and I was like, whoa, okay, that's going to be an experience, I'm going to learn about this. So, and again about how wishy-washy it was, I was like, oh God, how does anyone get anything done ever? So yeah, it made me respect event organisers way more. Yeah, that's my answer.